Hello and welcome to the Overland Journal podcast. I'm your host, Scott Brady, and I'm here with my co-host, Matt Scott. And Matt, what are we going to talk about today?
Why you should never buy a Toyota Tacoma, or alternative title, why full-size trucks are something you should seriously consider. I mean, I think the biggest problem that a lot of overlanders have is carrying too much crap. And I think the only reason that we say you shouldn't, technically, the technical reason as to why you shouldn't is you're over gross vehicle weight rating on for whatever platform you've chose. And a lot of these small trucks, you're talking sub 1,000 pounds for some. You're talking 1,100, 1,200. Gladiator and Ranger,
they get better. They get better
when properly configured, 1,700 pounds. And that really quickly goes.
It does.
That's not including people. That's not including the stuff that people need. Where you look at these full size trucks and you're doubling, tripling, quadrupling that.
You could put the compact pickup in the back of the full size truck. There's that much payload.
So if you are somebody who literally brings the kitchen sink, I guess everybody in America with trucks kind of has a thing. I'm a Ford guy. I don't know.
Ram. I would say it's a Ram for me. Yeah.
Yeah. I'm a Ford guy, but I wouldn't buy a Ford right now. I think that the Rams are fantastic for off-road use. I mean, they don't get the rear locker, but the coils and everything, they really seem like a big Jeep, I guess. But,
and that makes sense because you've got the same company that designs Jeeps, right?
Yeah.
So there's certainly some heritage that's there.
Yeah. So let's start off on I guess why a full size. We've already talked about payload, but let's also talk about how these things are built, right? I mean, full size trucks are built for everything from a mine site to a construction site. They have to be able to put up with a guy that isn't treating this like an enthusiast vehicle. They're treating it like a piece of equipment. They're treating it like a piece of
it's a commercial grade piece of equipment.
Yeah. And they're just built pretty tough. Let's think even Jeeps, right? Jeeps are relatively durable these days. You're still upgrading tie rods. A lot of people are still upgrading axles to go to bigger tires. Going to 40s on the Gladiator is now the big thing at a cost of $20,000 for Dynatrac axles, where you're actually getting something stronger on a 2500 that will fit 40s with AEV fender flares out of the box.
It will. And we're intentionally excluding the 1,500 trucks. I think a Ford F-150 is a great vehicle.
Yeah.
A Dodge Ram 1,500, absolutely great vehicle. But they aren't that much different in payload from a Gladiator or a Ranger, but then you have a much bigger vehicle. Yeah. So we're really focusing on those 3/4 ton, 1 ton plus trucks that can be built to be super capable, but then also carry 4,000, 3,000, 5,000 pounds.
Stuff that's actually capable of an actual conversion for expedition use. I mean, I guess I've mentioned it before, but I've seen so many people that build up Tacomas. A good buddy of mine just built up a Hilux. Put a 4-wheel camper with a flatbed on it, and it didn't move up hills because it has 80 horsepower.
Right.
Replaced it with a Tundra, and again to talk about that kind of I guess we're calling them half-ton trucks, even though some of these things can tow 13,000 pounds now.
Right.
Maybe that's a different podcast, but a lot of these trucks share a cab, share a lot of components. The F-150 and the F-250 have the same cab. I want to say the Ram now has a different cab, but
it does, yeah.
But eventually it will have the 1,500 cab because it's
really nice.
It's really, really nice.
Yeah.
So 1,500, whatever we're going to call those things, we'll definitely chat about that later. But these things are durable. They have a lot of storage. I mean, you're jumping from 5 foot, maybe 6 foot beds on the 1/4 ton trucks. Again, these things are all, these numbers mean nothing now.
Yeah.
But you're jumping to a wider bed. You're jumping to a longer bed, and that just gives you, I think, the flexibility of options.
Or even doing a cab chassis, which gives you totally flat rails. It allows you to fit custom camper units like from Nimble or Earth Cruiser. And when we talk about reliability and durability, we take a lot into consideration around use. So durability is different from reliability. It's how long will this thing endure at full payload. So if you take a full-size truck and you put a camper on the back of it, particularly a 3500, you're so far under gross vehicle weight that the vehicle is not being stressed.
Not at all.
It's used to carrying cords of wood, right? I mean, we're talking about not overdoing it. And that's the challenge with a lot of these small pickups, is that by the time you get them done and you put people and food and water and the dog in it, you could be 1,000 pounds over gross vehicle weight
quite easily. I mean, we always kind of use the Tacoma, I guess, as the comparison. They're about a 1,200 pound payload. Well, then you put, a 150 pound bumper on the front, you put a winch on the front, bumpers, sliders, all the stuff that these vehicles don't come equipped with. And well, you haven't even put your tent or your people in it, and you're pretty much there.
You're pretty much there.
Also, I think fuel range is a big thing. A lot of these diesel trucks get pretty darn good gas mileage. A lot of the, quarter ton stuff that I've driven, even my Gladiator, the Gladiator varies wildly between, 15 miles to the gallon and 20 miles to the gallon. But my F-250 I had before this, and this was the older generation F-250. I could get 18 in that like all day long when loaded up. It really wasn't an issue. And that thing had a 50 gallon tank.
I remember I had a long-term test, a Dodge Ram 2500 with 40s on it. So it was an AEV project vehicle, and it had the diesel. And I just remember I was driving it back from Montana, and I'm just cruising down the road. I don't want to overdo it. I mean, it is a truck on 40s, right?
Yeah.
But I'm just cruising down the road. And I remember after the second or third fill up, that's all it took about to get back to Arizona. But I remember looking down at the gas mileage. I was getting almost 18 miles to the gallon on a truck with 40-inch tire. That's incredible.
Yeah.
Like a 17.5, 17.6 average miles per gallon. Now, this was mostly on the highway, but this is a huge vehicle with a proper bumper and winch, snorkel, 40-inch tall tires, tons of ground clearance. And we're starting to see more and more of them on the trail, because I think what's happened is the Jeeps have gotten really big too.
Yep.
So that if you look at a Gladiator, that's 130 something inch wheelbase, you can get regular cab full-size trucks that are around 130 something inch.
Yeah.
wheelbase.
And they're not that much wider. I think that the use of space is arguably much better on a full-size truck, because you're pushing the cab all the way out just past the tires. Where on the Jeep, you have these full width axles that, you're then spacing the tires out, and the edge of the tire to the edge of the door can be 12 to 18 inches.
Sure.
That's space that, I have to say in the Jeep, I would love to have the capability that vehicle offers with that use of space. And that's what's called a power wagon.
That's right. Exactly. And I think you end up with a lot of flexibility in the full-size trucks. You can add additional fuel tanks. I mean, that's one of the challenges. All of the smaller trucks, except for the Chevy Bison, you can't get with a diesel. So you can't really add auxiliary fuel tanks because of EPA regulations. Whereas these full-size trucks, they'll have replacement main tanks, they'll have auxiliary tanks. You can end up with 1,000-mile range easy on those vehicles.
Yeah, and the difference was that is they just allow it for diesel. It's a fuel that doesn't
much
really
more stable.
evaporate.
Yeah.
It's much more stable. So you can get replacement tanks, you can get transfer tanks.
Yep.
You can Titan makes this spare tire thing. I want to say it's 40 gallons that replaces your spare tire.
Yeah, it's perfect.
And oftentimes that's a cavity that isn't used when you are building a large vehicle, because you can't fit the larger spare tire up underneath there. That's the thing that I miss. I miss that fuel range.
That's really helpful.
I miss seeing 1,000 miles of range out of a truck. Like that is just so cool. But yeah, I mean, I don't know. I mean, as a guy that just built a Gladiator that's owned full size stuff before, I kind of know that my next step will be a Prospector.
Yeah.
Because they're not actually that much bigger, and you get a lot for your money.
They're very affordable. If you look at in fact, I did that not that long ago because the last of the manual transmission full-size trucks was ending with last year. I think it was the 2018 model was the last that you could get, a Dodge Ram with a 6-speed manual. And I remember looking at that and fully spec'd out with the diesel and everything. I was just over $50,000. And I'm thinking that's the price of a Gladiator for a lot more truck.
A lot more truck. And, they're discounting Gladiators now too. I think it's important to, just to say that, Toyota plays a totally different game with their pricing than everybody else does. You see a Toyota for a $50,000 sticker, you're probably paying $50,000 for it. You see a Ford truck for $50,000, you might be able to get it for 35 at some dealership.
Yeah.
There's a lot of that. There's a bit of the game, which I don't know, as a millennial, I kind of hate that. I just want to be like, this is my price. This is my price. The rest of the time you're just screwing me.
Yeah.
So I don't like that about the experience of buying one of these things, but I want to say it's like Dennis Dillon up in Idaho is who Mario Donovan at Adventure Trailers gets all of his trucks from, because they specialize in people flying in, buying them. They're out the door, and it's really easy, and
they keep the volume up.
And $10,000, $15,000 off isn't that unreasonable to see.
That's cool.
Especially right now, they're also doing like 0% for 8,000 years on these things.
For the rest of your life, you pay no interest.
Yeah. So, I mean, there's your price savings right there.
It's a great deal. And when we think about overland travel, especially international travel, which is something that Matt and I focus on, you can still fit a full-size truck in a container.
Yeah.
You can fit it in the container with a 4-wheel camper if it's a high top container. So you can still ship a vehicle around the world, roll on, roll off. And we have to remember that even in the developing world, they still get goods and services throughout the country. And that may be done with a Mitsubishi Fuso, but a Fuso is still the size of a full-size US truck.
Yeah.
So their roads are going to still be serviced by these mid-size, or they call them like a mid-range utility vehicle. So you're going to be able to get a full-size truck into most of the routes around the world. Think of mining vehicles and NGOs and all of that are hauling goods and services. They're going to all be larger vehicles. So I don't think that a full size is that much of a restriction. Now, where I do find the full size to be a consideration is either in the really big cities or in the small villages. So if you go into a colonial village somewhere in Central America or South America, they were never designed for a vehicle that big, and you probably won't be able to fit down the streets. You're going to have to park that thing outside of town and walk, or take a taxi or a tuk-tuk or something like that. But you're not going to be able to take a full-size vehicle into the small villages. In the cities, you're going to have to time it right. So goods and services come in late at night or early in the morning. That's when you can drive a full-size vehicle. If you're trying to navigate Ulaanbaatar traffic at 5:00 in the afternoon, you're going to wish you were dead. You were dead. I did it in a Suzuki Jimny and wished I was dead. So you have to really be mindful of the size of the vehicle, depending on where you're traveling with it.
Yeah. I mean, everything's getting bigger, I think, these days. And that's definitely the thing that I dislike. I mean, I like smaller vehicles for traveling. I know that the Gladiator has those full width axles and stuff, but in the same way that I do complain about, the cab not being matched to those, it does just make it so much more maneuverable and
especially on the trail,
a lot smaller
on the trail.
But yeah, I mean, I think the biggest risk to a full size truck for an overland traveler, I mean, while they are durable, they definitely, I think they've gotten better, but there are reliability issues with these. Let's use the Ford 7.3, which the motor had been sold previously, but let's talk about that 99 to 03, 04 generation. Really, really sought after. The generation just after that with the 6-liter, like you can't touch.
Yeah.
I mean, they had EGR issues, they had
turbo issues,
a lot of things. And a lot of times to service some of the components on all of these diesel engines, you have to pull the cab off. So that's like what's always scared me about like an earth roamer, for example, because like earth roamers are very expensive. They're coming down in price on the used market to maybe where I could start to see value for myself on them. But man, what happens when like a rear main seal goes, which is a $2 part? What happens to the truck? I don't know. I mean, like, is that something that some guru mechanic can fix? But I've always been told that you have to take the entire cab off.
Sure.
And that is not something that somebody's going to know how to do. And, in
Tajikistan, right?
Yeah. Or wherever,
sure.
you're at. And that brings up, I mean, are they a global platform? I don't know. I mean, I get parts overnighted from my Land Cruiser from Dubai in like 2 days for $12. So I don't think the parts are necessarily an issue. I think it's finding somebody that actually knows how to work on them.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, Ford, Chevy, Dodge, they don't really sell these platforms outside of North America. You're going to find them all throughout, Mexico and Central America, obviously Canada,
a little bit in South America. Argentina does bring in some,
but a lot of those are made there.
Yeah.
And they'll run a completely different powertrain.
True.
Like I remember when I was running Panama Passage, this must have been 10 years ago in Panama, an Argentinian couple came through and, a Super Duty, but it had like a 2-liter engine in it.
Yeah.
And I'm like, wait, that cannot be fun.
Yeah.
I mean, these things need a big motor and they're really fun when they have that big motor. But I mean,
I think you kind of, once you decide to bring an obscure vehicle around the world, you have to plan for the fact that you may have to not only fly the parts in, but you may have to fly the mechanic in to fix it.
Potentially. Yeah.
And that's a consideration. If you've got a very modern vehicle that can't be self-serviced or requires special tools or special training or even special instruments in order to do that service, you've kind of just got to, from the very beginning, realize that I'm not driving a Sprinter that is sold in almost every country.
Yep.
I'm driving a vehicle that's primarily sold in Canada and the United States. And if I am in the middle of Southeast Asia, or if I'm crossing Russia, it might be possible that I need to fly somebody in with the parts to do the service.
I mean, luckily the parts for these things aren't terribly expensive.
No, they're not.
They make millions of them. So there's economies of scale there. But, I think, for people that are listening to this podcast that, maybe they want to do, the Pan American Highway, or they want to really explore the US and Canada.
Perfect.
I mean, like, I love the new Rams. You can get like a 60-gallon fuel tank from the factory. I don't know. I love fuel range. It's just one less thing to have to worry about. And
it takes a lot of stress out of it.
Yeah. And honestly, with these vehicles getting bigger and bigger and bigger, it's just less that you have to stop to try and find that little gas station. So,
and you've got to do some research yourself on the legalities of making changes to these modern diesels, but there are kits available for some of these diesels. They're called farm kits. They remove the catalytic converter. They remove the DEF system because they're designed to be used off the road only. Once you've left the United States, EPA no longer applies. So do some research, understand the legalities of the countries that you're going into, but it is possible to still use these modern diesels.
Yeah, even with factory parts.
That's right.
Ford sells the 6.7 in the United States at 1 power rating, and they sell it in Mexico at another power rating, and it doesn't require DEF. I haven't looked into that in a few years. That was for my 2016, but I never really advocate for deleting emissions because it's like, I don't know, like a $250,000 fine, and the environment is something that we should save. But,
yeah, you definitely don't want to do it in the United States, but there are provisions for some of this for international travel. It's worth looking into if you're concerned about taking one of these diesels internationally.
And we also have things like the Ford F-250 and 350 now offer a 7.3 gas engine, really compact pushrod V8, huge, should be super reliable. It's a replacement for their V10. It's a big, just
earth moving
unstressed engine.
Yeah.
You know, that the 6.4 that's in the Rams, they've been making that motor forever.
Yeah. Those Hemis are great.
You don't have to have the diesel. I do think if you're staying in North America, I don't know, like having nearly 1,000 foot-pounds of torque is awesome.
It's kind of magical, right?
It's really great. You know, and again, a lot of times these look at what you're doing. You know, I like big tires on my vehicles because my Greyhound doesn't like bumps. And, you know, if I'm using the Tacoma or Ranger or anything, you're going to struggle to put 33s in those vehicles and you're going to spend some money to do it. You might be able to fit a 37 on a lot of these new trucks. I mean, AEV's putting 40s on them.
They are.
And they handle it just fine. So
it's incredible how well they handle it.
Yeah.
And one of the things I noticed the first time I properly tested a full-size truck. So this was maybe 8 years ago or so. And I got my hands on a Power Wagon and I picked it up and I'm driving out to California and I was maybe a couple hours into the drive and I was realizing that this might be the most comfortable vehicle I've ever driven on the highway.
They're really nice
because it was reasonably quiet.
Yep.
But it was so roomy. You felt like you were in a Burka lounger going down I-10. So
some of
really
these vehicles are really luxurious. You're getting massage seats in them.
Really? Oh
yeah.
No, it sounds terrible. But maybe because I've never had a car with massaging seats. But
don't knock it till you've tried it.
Yeah, I got you.
But they're great grand touring vehicles. I mean, for something that is meant to spend time in, that is what these vehicles are. These are mobile offices. I mean, think of the F-150. Ford, a few days prior to this podcast, released, I want to say, the 14th generation of the F-150. Generally for Ford, that leads the innovation, and then that will trickle down into their Super Duty lineup. But we're talking like seats that turn into beds like first class.
I saw that. That was impressive.
The center console like folds forward to create a desk.
Yep.
You know, these vehicles are meant to spend time in as an office. And I think as an Overlander, that's what I miss about having a full-size vehicle is there's like 12 cup holders. There's a cup holder everywhere. Like if you think about it, it will literally appear. There's places to put everything imaginable and they're spacious. They're nice.
And they probably receive a lot of thoughtful engineering dollars behind them because they're so important to these brands, these North American brands. Yeah. So I think it seems like they really take the time to engineer them well. So a question for you, Matt. So you owned a full-size Ford. What did you like about it? What were the modifications that you did to it? You know, how did it work for you?
I regret selling it. So I had a 2016 F-250 with the diesel. That was the last of that body style that had been around since the late 90s. You know, I put it on 37s. I did like a 4.5 inch Icon lift. You know, 4.5 inches is a lot for me, but I think it's all relative to the size of the vehicle. You know, a Tacoma on 2 inches is probably like a full size truck, right? I mean, you know, you got to think size. I did 37s. I did a Titan tank on it, which I want to say was like 57 gallons. Don't hold me to that, but it was a lot of stuff. Did a Lightner rack, did a Rhino rack on the cab. It was great. You know, it was the King Ranch model. I bought it from a dealership in Phoenix in the summer. I think I paid $54 out the door and it had a 66 sticker on it. Now granted that was the last year, but now these deals are commonplace. You know, I really liked it. The things I didn't like about it, it was a bit cumbersome to drive, but that was the old body style. I've driven a lot of the newer stuff and they're definitely better. You know, get used to turning that wheel multiple times. Yeah, you know, they're not like this small, easily maneuverable car. But they can be very capable off-road. They can be very fast because they definitely do not lack power. I like it. I mean,
did you take it on the trail much?
I've never really described myself as a wheeler.
Yeah.
You know, so I didn't do any like major technical stuff with it. You know, we had it down in Baja a few times. We had it in Sonora. We had it in the dunes. I chased the Rebel Rally with it. So that entire course we did.
And how did it do with that?
Down a set of tires for that, but it was awesome. I mean, we could carry everything and then be like airborne and doing 100 mile an hour down these roads. And, some of that stuff was kind of closed course and there's no speed limits in Nevada on dirt. So they say, but it just worked.
Sure.
My thing for full size is if it fits, it gets.
Yeah.
Like if you can fit the vehicle through it, it's going to go. I always say that, lockers on full size trucks are helpful, but if you're in a situation where you're like, I need lockers for this vehicle to do the things I do.
Maybe it's the wrong vehicle.
I mean,
although it was interesting, a couple years,
hot take.
Yeah. A couple years ago, I was in Moab for Easter Jeep and Dave.
Full size Invasion does that every year.
Yeah. And Dave Harriton had brought down his single, regular cab, no extended cab, just a single cab, 3,500 with a tray back on 41-inch tall tires. I think maybe even a little bit bigger than that, maybe 42s. And he had front and rear lockers for it, really good ground clearance. And I think he even disconnected the sway bar. But he was really, and he has spent a lot of time driving the trails in Moab. And he took it everywhere he wanted it to go. The only thing he said that was a little creepy with it was like the sketchy technical descents, because it was so lightly loaded in the rear.
I can see that.
He was having the rear end pop up on him pretty aggressively. But other than that, he took that truck everywhere that they were taking the Jeeps, the JKs.
Yeah. And I think a lot of that is because you can fit a 41-inch tire.
Yeah. Gives you a lot of flexibility.
They're big, but they're not that much bigger than a lot of stuff these days. And obviously, like Dave really, really knows his stuff. He's a phenomenally talented driver. And
he's a good driver.
He knows, he's like the Enzo Ferrari of overlanding. Like he knows how to build stuff really, really well.
Yeah.
But I don't know. I guess I still don't think that they're like if technical four-wheel driving is your thing,
it should be a different vehicle. Yeah,
probably. There's a difference between the springs on my Gladiator that are made to flex over the boulder and the springs on the full-size truck that are meant to carry the boulder.
Yeah,
right.
For sure.
You're going to get to a point where if you're chasing off-road capability, I don't know. I know I'm going to get a million people who are like, oh, well, I take my truck down this. I'm like, yeah, that's great. But they have different purposes. I think that from a travel perspective, I think the full size has a lot of merit. And there's a couple notable models that are available now. The Tremor package on the Ford Super Duty. What do you think of that thing? I really like it. And the thing that I like most is you can go and you can choose you can go and build your vehicle, and then you can put the Tremor package on, I want to say anything. So if you want a limited or a platinum with massaging seats, and these trucks do these days, you can just have that on top of it with the diesel rear locking differential. I want to say it has a Torsen style front, really similar to the Raptor that I had. And honestly, like modern vehicles don't really lack traction. I think they're really cool. Love the idea of the diesel. Love the idea of of that built-in winch. It might be an option, but it's definitely on that Tremor package.
It is. Yeah.
If you're talking out of the box Overlander in the United States right now, it comes with a 33 or 35 inch LT tire,
35,
appropriate spring rates that you can choose based on your packaging, as opposed to the Power Wagon, which only comes in with that Hemi gas motor, which is a good motor. And only has one payload rating. So I think the Ford is pretty nice. A Tremor package with a 4-wheel camper, drive it around the world tomorrow.
Yeah, it's pretty dialed, ready to go. And if the fact that you could do the 7.3 gas motor if you wanted.
Yeah.
So that's pretty interesting and that's the same way that the Bison packages, you can kind of, figure out your ZR2 and then add the Bison on top of it.
I didn't know that. That's cool.
Yeah. So that's pretty clever. I think that's nice to see that as an option. That way you can end up getting the truck that you really want.
Yeah. I think for the guys that are, more wheelers, they want to do more technical stuff. I think that the Power Wagon is really it's a Rubicon XL in a lot of ways. You get one of those on a lift underneath and it's It's a 5-link that looks nearly identical to what's on a Wrangler. It
sway bar disconnects, everything.
Yeah. I mean, for technical stuff, as an all-around truck, I do have to say, after owning a Gladiator for a year, do I almost regret that I didn't get a Power Wagon? Maybe.
Yeah.
Definitely maybe. If there was a Power Wagon in diesel, I would.
Right.
That's what I would be driving.
Right.
But then you also get like the cool thing with the Ram is that their payload capacity is just insane. And, on the 2500, I want to say it's 20,000 pounds of towing now. I mean, I know it's over 30 on the 3500 when equipped. I mean, you need a CDL for that. Yeah. Basically, in the same way that we won the horsepower game, we won the towing game.
Sure.
So the 2500 I really like because it still has that coil rear.
I think that's such a compelling option. A Ram 2500 with the coil sprung rear end, regular cab. I mean, that would probably be the vehicle that I would build. It'd be a regular cab 2500, flatbed on it, 4-wheel camper, 41-inch tall tires, all the AEV
just
stuff.
So nice inside. I was sitting on the Rubicon with Jim Morrison, who's now the CEO of Jeep, used to be the CEO of Ram, in my opinion, when they really turned around. I think their older models were kind of
okay. Yeah.
They were okay. Like you close the tailgate and, you could hear the metal move and it wasn't very nice, but and this is paraphrasing, but essentially they made the gamble. They heard that Ford and Chevy were going to increase the amount of money that they were spending on the interiors of these trucks. So he went and basically said, okay, we're doubling down. And this is general paraphrasing. Don't quote me. So Ram ended up putting a lot of money into their interiors when everyone else pulled back. So now these manufacturers are really just playing catch up. I mean, I've never seen a better interior in a pickup truck than I have inside of a Ram. I do think the Ford drivetrain is maybe a little bit better. They have that available 10-speed transmission, which is just, you're always in the power band.
Sure.
But I would do a 2500. I think you're right. They're so compelling.
And 1,000 foot-pounds of torque in these things now.
That's in the 3500s. Yeah.
Yeah. I can't even imagine.
I mean, the next big step will be, turning these things into locomotives. They'll be diesel electric.
Yeah.
But I can't wait for them to just go electric. I'm really interested in the Cybertruck. I have a pre-order for one in. If you follow Elon Musk on Twitter, he's an interesting cat. And somebody, it was either, I want to say it was Tesla, put out a rendering of a Cybertruck with this tent in the back.
Yeah.
And he responded, yeah, this is actually going to be a thing. We're going to make a camper option out of these. So you'll be able to have air conditioning, heating. You won't need a dual battery system. They're going to put solar panels on top of that little retractable roof that'll add, I want to say 10 to 15 miles of range a day, which isn't a lot. But for us, if you're on slow speed technical trails, you're not using that much energy anyways, because there's no wind resistance. There's no rolling resistance.
Yeah.
I can't wait for that Cybertruck. I mean,
and with it being as kind of slab sided and everything as it is, I think it's going to lend itself to some pretty interesting concepts.
It's just kooky, you know? Is kooky. I mean, it has over 500 miles of range and accelerates as fast as a mid-engine Corvette. Like it kind of makes everybody else be like,
what do we do next? Yeah, exactly. So what would be if you were to build any full-size truck right now,
today?
And no budget, no limit, whatever, what would you build?
I'd just go buy an Earth Roamer.
Yeah.
But if I was to build something, I don't know. I mean, it would definitely be a Ram 2500. No contest right now for me. I mean, the Tremor is really nice and I like that stuff, but the Rams.
And would it be the Power Wagon or
no, it would be a 2500. Honestly, like everybody loves to say, oh, I need lockers. Oh God, I have to have lockers.
Yeah. Well, you could still put lockers in.
Yeah, I can put lockers in it if I want it. I mean, I would do that. I would probably do a 4-wheel camper or similar in the back. I mean, I like the 4-wheel camper stuff, and I'd send it to AEV. I mean, honestly, I'd just buy a Prospector. Like, if you have the money and you don't have the time, just
get it delivered that way.
Send your check to AEV and be done. that's my thing. I like the 4-wheel camper stuff. It's just simple. You can take them out really easily.
Right.
They're not very pretentious, which I think,
I like that.
What about you?
I think it would be similar. I was totally smitten by Dave's 2500, and we drove a bunch of those prospectors up to Tuktoyaktuk.
Yeah.
And we took it on the ice roads. And so I had days and days of time in those. And then we had a prospector for a couple months. And it's also really important to note that AEV is not sponsoring this podcast.
Yeah.
We just happen to be huge fans of what they do.
I have AEV stuff on order for my Gladiator at full price.
Yeah.
That's,
we just happen to really like the products that they make. But I think it would be the 2500 with the coil springs. I would put at least a locker in the rear. Probably would put one in the front at the same time, just because while you're doing it. But I would go with the full AEV suspension. I really like their front bumper a lot.
Yeah,
I like the modularity of it. I like the strength of the recovery points and how the winch mounts to it as well. And then the wide fenders, so I could get the 40-inch tall tires on there. At first, I thought I don't know if I would want 40s, but once you drive a full size on 40s. Then you can take it.
They're just bigger balloons.
And they're really comfortable on the trail when you air down. Yeah. And I did a lot of the local trails with it, including our test track, and it had no trouble. It was flawless through that terrain. So, and the reason why I like the bigger tires on the full size trucks is these are heavy vehicles. So you need a lot of flotation if you get into soft surfaces. So if you get into mud or you get into snow or sand, that additional footprint, that flotation is really critical. So it may be like, why would I need 40s or 37s on a truck like that? Well, you really start to, if you're getting into anything soft. So there's definitely a reason to have that. But that would be my setup: flatbed, put a 4-wheel camper on the back, and off you go.
Because you can use it. They fulfill so many different purposes. Like my Gladiator, for example, is now a very niche vehicle. There's no truck bed campers for, like slide in style campers for those things, because of the way the cab's quite tall in relation to the bed. And then, you start putting big tires and stuff on them, and you end up with, basically at capacity, where everything that we're talking about doing, you still have the capacity of the Gladiator
totally
fully built
on top of it.
And you can tow with it.
Yeah.
I think they're pretty versatile.
And they're actually reasonably priced. Now any new vehicle is expensive, but if you compare it within the world of new vehicles, what you're getting for the quality, the drivetrain that you're getting, the fact that you can spec out a 2500 Ram for under 60 grand with 4-wheel drive and diesel and everything else.
That's 60. If you're paying 60 for that, you're getting leather and you're getting a lot of options.
Yeah, they're really, I think, a great value personally.
Yeah, for what you're getting. I mean, it's a highly competitive segment. It's arguably, like, American pickup trucks are arguably the most competitive segment in the automotive industry in the world.
Yeah.
Right. They thrive on innovation. There's multiple parties that are, you obviously you have the big three, and then, there are things like the Nissan kind of came in as trying to be in between,
with an XD,
kind of an in-between truck.
So let's talk a little bit about the aftermarket. Obviously, we've got ARB makes a bunch of stuff for full size now. That's new for them.
I had one of their modular bumpers on my F250, and it was fantastic. Aesthetically, it looked good.
I think it did look good. Yeah.
It was really nice. It performed well. I guess I didn't really hit that many things with it, but it looked like you could run it into a mountain and the mountain would lose. I really liked the ARB actually over the AEV, just because of animal strike protection. They had that traditional grill for the front end. At the time I was living outside of Telluride, Colorado, and there was elk and there was deer and there was things that were in the road. And I really valued that. Warren has a lot of great bumpers and options.
Although I think the AEV, the newest version of the AEV,
they do. I have
now
seen
has
that.
the full.
I forgot about that.
But you're right. When you would have bought it at that time frame, it wouldn't have had it.
Yeah. Yeah. Warren does a full series of bumpers too. which are, I've never had anything bad from Warn. I mean, I put Warn winches on like
everything,
like, cause it's just one less thing to think about. And as far as guys that are really building these, you'll hear us talk about AT Overland. Full disclosure, we are friends with these guys, but I don't think there's another shop that knows building, full size, specifically the Rams. I mean, Mario has like
3 or 4
of them himself. Yeah, like, they really know these vehicles. They do 4-wheel campers. They do a bunch of custom stuff. They
really specialize in maximizing the performance and the round the world suitability of a full size. And then there's a bunch of, there's of course the earth roamers of the world, but then between that, there are camper modules that can be fitted. So like Earth Cruiser makes an EXD. So you've got Nimble, and Nimble came from XP Camper and has seen a lot of improvements.
Yeah, those are like the XPs on XP campers or Nimble campers now on a full size truck. That's a great option. I've traveled with some people in those and they love them. I would say they're a step above a 4-wheel camper in terms of price and features. You're looking at more hard sided,
sure,
or kind of
origami almost
style things. A little bit more modern design maybe, but.
And then of course, 4-wheel campers, which you see them everywhere. They're super popular.
That's peanut butter and jelly for an American truck. And then you have all the wedge campers. I mean, like Go Fast campers. I think the one of note is the 5010 camper by Goose Gear. Brian over really there has what do you call all of these manufacturers keep changing the things. Like it used to be crew cab and then it was like super cab. I don't know. He has the one that has
mega cab.
It has an actual door and then a smaller door.
Yeah. So it's like an extended cab.
Extended cab. Yes, we'll call it that. He has one of those with the 5010 camper and it's all built out inside.
It looks really good. I have to say, aesthetically, other than maybe the front bumper, that's one of the best looking full sizes I've seen.
Yeah, it's really nice.
We'll post a picture of that in the show notes. It's flexed out at an Overland
Chris
Expo.
took all those photos. I remember like it was at the end of Overland Expo East last year, 2019, because we won't have shows for a long time. And I'm watching this truck like flex through this stuff. And I want to say he has Icon suspension or something on it.
It's really good.
It
was impressive.
It gets,
yeah.
But I don't know. I mean, I guess we'll kind of leave it at that. Full size trucks are definitely something I think more people should consider as smaller cars kind of bloat. The size difference between them is less than you'd think.
Yeah. The difference in size between a Gladiator and a Ram 2500 is not that much.
No. I remember Chris Cortez had his Excursion parked next to my Gladiator. And I want to say my Gladiator was
Longer wheelbase for sure.
Longer wheelbase for sure. I mean, I remember when that was just a massive vehicle. And now I'm like, oh, I like my Gladiator. It's so small. I think that they, particularly for people that maybe are getting to the end of the road as far as their Tacoma, Colorado, whatever goes, I think it's kind of inevitable, but that full size kind of becomes the future in the US.
It will, for those that pack heavy, for those that want a lot of features, that for those that want a camper. If you go with a simple roof tent, or you're a backpacker and you're able to just throw a ground tent in the back, then these small vehicles are still great because you gain a lot of advantage with that, a lot of performance. But if you want to put everything in the kitchen sink, then maybe consider a full size next time.
Yeah. Well, take care, guys.
Thank you all for listening.
Thanks for listening.
We'll talk to you next time.